I do have a bit of a background. I was on the startup team at Sprint. Think of 250 people, $2 billion worth of spectrum, $7.5 billion of cash, and a business plan. Literally, we went out and built a nationwide network from scratch. My role was I did the interconnection negotiations with all 7 of the then Bell operating companies. I wrote the first roaming contract, wrote the first resale contract, wrote the first signaling contract, because we used the old SS7 network for signaling and transport. 5 years at Sprint, 5 years at the Sprint affiliate, building networks in Eastern Washington, Central Valley of California, Idaho, Indiana, some other locations, and then 5 years in Seattle, where I hosted the CEO of a hosted the IP and would work at Microsoft doing business deals for them in wireless and wireline telecommunications. My role here at the University of Utah is a technology ambassador. I sit between the research going on at the university and outside industry and try to figure out how we can align interests, how we can make the research more meaningful to companies in Utah, and how we can find issues in the state that could be addressed by research at the University of Utah. And one of the projects I've most recently worked on was to go after a $25 million grant to build a platform for advanced wireless research. Think a 4G, 5G test bed. Here, we won that. We had over 30 competitors. You had to be a research university in the city there. Think University of Texas, City of Austin, Stanford and Palo Alto, Carnegie Mellon, Pittsburgh, University of Chicago, City of Chicago, and we one of 2 of those here, Salt Lake City and the University of Utah, and Rutgers, Columbia, NYU, and New York City. This advanced wireless work and new technologies are really where I work, what I do. And this presentation is to give you a little history and background and to give you some food for thought. So let's have a little fun. Title this, A New Technology Economy, Smart Cities in the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It's a big title. We are in a radically changed technology environment. And yet, the technology changes are actually accelerating. And I'll talk about that in a little while. And when and how will smart cities be affected? When will all these changes be implemented? Fundamental question of interest to this group, I'm sure. But let's do a little background. Here's a 40-year cycle from 1975 to 2015. And it shows the value of tangible versus intangible assets for the Fortune 500. 1975, 17% of the value of the Fortune 500, or the S&P 500, was in intangible assets. Software, patents, trademarks, soft assets. The rest, planes, trains, and things. General Motors factories. Move forward 40 years and it completely flips. It's now 16% trains, planes, and things, 84% intangible assets. That's extraordinary. And those intangible assets include things like Uber, the largest taxi company in the world that does not own a taxi. Airbnb, the largest hotel company in the world, does not own a hotel. We have moved to where intellectual property and intellectual assets are of high value. What's that mean to the value of companies? Well, in 2008, the 5 largest companies in the world by market capitalization were ExxonMobil, PetroChina, General Electric, Gazprom, China Mobile. Move to 2013, you get Apple, which is an integrated software hardware company. ExxonMobil, Berkshire Hathaway, PetroChina, Walmart. Significantly, the combined market capitalization of those 5 companies was about $1.6 trillion. 6 years later, 6 years, 2019, the 5 most valuable companies in the world Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, Alphabet, Facebook, with a market capitalization of over $4.4 trillion, 2.5 times what it was 6 years earlier for those other companies. And not only a market cap of $4.2 trillion, but holding $630 billion in cash. An extraordinary economic power. $630 billion in cash. That's after those same companies made $143 billion worth of acquisitions from 2006 through 2018 actually. And this little chart down here talks about some of those through 2017. Microsoft buys LinkedIn, Skype, Nokia. Google buys Motorola, Nest, YouTube. Amazon buys Whole Foods, Zappos, Ring, and others. But significantly, that's, on top of having $630 billion in cash, they make $143 billion in acquisitions. But last year, they kind of changed where the focus was. Here's 2018 acquisitions, about $10 billion for these companies. Take a look at, first, I want to highlight for Google, a company called Synosis. What Synosis is a healthcare management company. Today's Wall Street Journal talks about Google going out now developing all the intelligence, getting massive data from healthcare companies. They bought this company that is actually, Synosis does diagnostics on the edge of the network using cell phones, etc. But Google also, by the way, hired Vivian Lee to run their new healthcare initiatives. Vivian Lee formerly ran healthcare up here at the University of Utah. They clearly are going after healthcare management and integration with their large data set networks. What about Facebook? Facebook buys ChainSpace, a blockchain company. And out of ChainSpace, they create their own currency called Libra. And they announced it, about 2 months ago? They've tried now figuring out how they can create their own money. This one's interesting. Amazon. Amazon buys PillPack. PillPack's a Utah company. They bought it for $1 billion. The day after Amazon buys, PillPack, by the way, has pharmaceutical licenses for all 50 states. The day after Amazon buys PillPack for $1 billion, its market capitalization increases by $20 billion. And the market cap for Walgreens, CVS, and Rite Aid decreases by $11 billion. So you get a $1 billion acquisition and a $31 billion difference in the capitalization of the marketplace. In addition to making all those acquisitions, having that much cash, in 2018, these companies had $103 billion in research. Think about that, $100 billion in research dollars. Most of that going into artificial intelligence. But to give you a marker for that, how many people here know what the budget is for the National Science Foundation, our premier research, government research entity? In 2018, it was $8 billion. These 5 companies alone are well over, 8 or 9 times that amount of money in terms of research. Lest we think that they're alone in this whole process, here's another $60 billion in research and acquisitions in 2018. Various companies in technology areas. The interesting ones here are Utah's own $8 billion acquisition of Qualtrics. There's a lot of people in Utah that made a whole bunch of money with that. And IBM's acquisition of Red Hat, which was a non-profit, that was an open software platform. They bought it for $34 billion. Now, somebody I know well joined that company about 3 months ahead of time as the chief information officer. And when all his options vested immediately, he was a very happy man. Apart from that, here's another thing to consider. We're moving to where the marketplace is recognizing all these technology industries and financing them. These are IPOs. 2017, 2019, everything took off. Through the first 8 months of 2019, there's a 42 billion in IPOs, $42 billion raised in initial public offerings by these technology companies, and there were 123 referenced in the Wall Street Journal by the end of July of 2019. So it's just gotten hot, you know? But if you just step back and think about it, if you take the $630 billion that cash that these companies held, Q1 of this year, the big guys, and you look at the amount of money they put into research and R&D, and the amount of money now being raised, we're talking over $1 trillion of new economics, if you will, for technology industries. And you got to ask, okay, what's changed? What's happened? Why? And the answer is new technologies and what's called the network effect. Yeah, it took 50 years for telephones to get to 50 million users. You can see the third line. It took, I think it was 14, I think the right number, just so I got it in mind. 14 years for computers to get to 15 million users. It took the internet 7 years. It took Facebook 3 years. It took Pokemon Go 19 days to get out to 15 million users. Think about that. And yet, and this is going to now come back to this whole smart cities initiative, where we're going. And yet, I personally believe we are only at the beginning. We are literally at the beginning of what's going to happen in technology and our economy. We're entering what's called the fourth industrial revolution. Everything today has been down through this third, which is IT and the integration and automation of production and services. We're now moving to a place where we're going to start integrating physical and biological domains. We're going to, the changes that are coming near to us in the future far surpass what we have done in the last dozen years. And think about it, the last dozen years created over $1 trillion in liquidity, cash liquidity, that went into various things, like research. Here are the targeted technologies that I went to various sources and came up with these. And this is what we're looking at. These are the things that are the future. Advanced wireless, and I've got a bias, so I put it first. That's what I've done. You know, that's the work that I've been involved in, and have a feel for where that future is going. But artificial intelligence, AI, I was at a Brookings Institute presentation about 3 months ago, where they said about 50% of all jobs in the United States can be done by AI, artificial intelligence. Think about that. 50% of all, what do we do with those people? The #1 job in the United States right now on a state-by-state basis is truck driver. What happens to truck drivers over the next 5 to 10 years? What do they do? What do you do with a 55-year-old, 56-year-old who's been driving a truck for 25 years and all of a sudden he's replaced by a robot? And Lynn could probably talk to you more about that than I can. What's going to happen in the future. Nanoscale technology. We have a nanofab up at the university. We're looking at microfluidics. We're looking at graphene. Graphene is a single-layer molecule that has extraordinary capabilities and characteristics. Synthetic biology. We have a woman at the University of Utah who is creating bacteria, is creating enzymes that eats sugar that produces electricity. How would you like to be able to put a dollop of sugar butter in your cell phone and have it last a month, have the battery last a month? We're talking biological batteries. Or there's a group out of MIT that have looked at the processes by which crustaceans create their shells and applied that to the creation of anodes and cathodes for batteries. A natural biological process is creating a new material, very efficient anodes and cathodes. It just goes on and on. We've got folks here in this room that are working on digital health issues. There's old Braveheart himself over there, Ted McElroy. Digital health. He can tell you all about it. But what I'd like to turn to for just a moment is to talk about 4G and 5G, because that's my area. You know, I know a little bit more about that than most of these other areas. And first, let's start with 4G and its benefits. Think about this. But for fourth generation wireless networks, or 4G, they gave us Uber, Lyft, and Airbnb because of the ability to handle data and create these systems and platforms. Scooters in the city. How many people have been on one of those scooters? I've used it. Anybody else, you know? I've also been nearly run over by them a couple of times. Big issue. Do you allow them on sidewalks or do you force them on streets? There's already been several people killed, by the way, on streets by falling into cars and hitting cars. And there's been pedestrians run over. I think the number I saw was 1,500 emergency calls. So we've got to come up with new rules for this one. Dogs in the city. I love this. There's a company that's now producing dog houses and putting them around the country in various cities, right? So you can walk your dog downtown instead of tying him up outside and worrying about it while you go and have a cup of coffee. You got a little dog house that you can reserve. It's air conditioned, it's heated in the winter, and you know, you pay for a little use of the dog, and the dog's locked in there and safe. You got a big, you look it up. There's a big window in the front, so you can see the little doggy in there. They're safe, secure. Drones, truck imaging for road potholes and cracks. In fact, right now, Utah Department of Transportation is taking pictures of potholes using drones. Paul Wheeler runs that program. And one of the issues is they're not getting enough contrast with the existing camera technology. Well, we have a camera technology up at the university that's actually moving into hyperspectral imaging capability in a standard lens, meaning you can see infrared and ultraviolet by that kind of imaging. Big Belly Truck, the trash cans. It's a great company. They've got these trash cans. They're smart trash cans. They compact, and they send out a signal when they need to be empty. So, and they're right across the country. Plus, they're now adding 5G capability in the trash cans. So they've got spaces in the back for the computation that would support 5G by deploying these smart trash cans as well. Real-time air and water quality monitoring. We've got 2 grants pending at the University of Utah for both those things using an advanced wireless network. Enhanced security. This is a two-headed monster. There's the ability now to, based on gunshots, know where gunfire is coming from in a city by the acoustics. And the amount of sensors, you have to have a large number of sensors to do that. You also then want cameras to spot the people that are doing that. But that then taken to its extreme turns into China, which has over 600 million cameras now, and they're using facial recognition to identify people that are outcasts, I guess. They're also, by the way, in was it Copenhagen? They're now using facial recognition to spot the hooligans at the soccer games, so they can ban and convene. That's what 4G gives us. 4G, fourth generation wireless. We're now going to move to 5G. Okay? 5G, we're in a horse race right now. US, China, and Europe. And part of the reason we got our grant, our $25 million grant, is the NSF was realizing we're losing. We're behind China right now in terms of development of 5G technology. What's 5G do? It's 100 times the speeds of the current network we have, fourth generation. It moves from 100 milliseconds of latency to sub 5 milliseconds. What's that mean? Well, the human body snaps its fingers at about 10 milliseconds of latency. The new 5G network will be faster than the way you communicate with your own body. It will also support massive deployments of densities and massive numbers of sensors. You get 10,000 sensors measuring heat, light, whatever you want, and you can have massive crowds. You can handle all the data needs of everybody at the stadium who want to see different views on their cell phone of the activities going on the field in a game. 5G is a game changer that will determine the future of global technology and economic leadership, period. Whoever gets there first controls it. But our secret sauce, to my mind, is the Chinese may come up with the better technology. We seem to be better at coming up with the applications. You know, how do you use it? What do you make from it? And that's where our secret sauce may lie. Because 5G will enable augmented and virtual reality. Yeah. How many know what augmented reality is? That's Pokemon Go. You know, where you've got so you have the ability for an HVAC repairman to come in, identifies what the air conditioner is, and then put on a set of goggles and see all the schematics for that air conditioner in real time. Augmented reality will also allow you to, instead of when you want to get a fiber line coming to your home, going out and getting little flags that get planted to tell you where the gas lines and the electric lines are, put on a set of goggles, you can see them underneath the ground. And that's happening in real time right now, folks. We've got, it will allow autonomous machines and vehicles, because without the ability of 5G to support that, we will not be able to have those deployments. Smart homes and smart factories. There's a company here in Salt Lake that I've recently come to know that has intelligent windows, so that you can darken a window if it's on the sun side of things. They're actually headquartered out of the Bay Area, but the research group is down here in the Salt Lake Cardboard Building involved in this. And their goal is to become a building manager of HVAC and heating systems, because they can then control the heat load real time on a large building. Their long-term goal is to turn those smart windows into smart audio-visual sites. So you could have your large conference table go into the wall and then extend out, and the people that are sitting over there may be 1,000 miles away, but the whole window becomes a smart monitor for that activity. Smart homes and factories, and this is fascinating to me. And we're going to move to manufacturing as a service. Think of it this way. Historically, I needed a CNC machine, some kind of machine to make equipment in the middle of a factory. I would buy that, and then buy the software, and then hire somebody to maintain it, hire somebody to load and maintain the software, buy a contract, usually 20% of the original cost of the software from the supplier, and run that machine. And then 5 years later, have to buy a new one. The model that's starting to develop is, I'm a CNC machine operator, and I will take care of that for you. I'll put it in your factory. You tell me how many widgets you want. I will run it remotely, and I'll produce them for you. That's where we're going. Automation inside a factory as a service by third parties. And 5G enables that. And the reason it does is because when you build a factory today, historically, you would have fiber going to all the equipment across the factory floor. If you wanted to move something, you had to run a new line. That's not the case. It's going to be the case with 5G networks. You'll be able to move that equipment wherever you want, and that would do whatever it needs to do. We're going to have advanced integrated systems, integrated management of healthcare. You're going to see people wearing clothes that are smart clothes that can measure what's going on inside your body and can react if you start having an event like a heart attack. So that's what's happening, and I think the answer for us is the question here is what are the new business models? I could not have foreseen that Airbnb and Uber and Lyft would have come out of the creation of fourth generation wireless networks. I'm not smart enough to know what all the business models are that are going to come out of these new 5G networks. But there's going to be billion-dollar businesses, I can guarantee it. Just don't know what they are. Somebody in this room may be the next Zuckerberg or whatever. That's my thinking about this whole system. Ranted on. Maybe some questions? Yes, sir.
So, if you mentioned, I apologize. When do you think 5G will really be ubiquitous and common for us? And then
Really good question. Good
how
question.
does Wi-Fi 6 play in this?
A couple of answers to that. First, Wi-Fi, it looks like Wi-Fi is going to become a real problem because this 5G will overload the spectrum, overload the networks. And Wi-Fi may become virtually unusable for certain commercial purposes. And what we're doing is we're moving to something called private LTE, private long-term evolution. And the issue there is you've got to have somebody a spectrum in order to set up a private network on that spectrum. And that will be what eventually we move to with 5G, is I think these private spot networks. Think of an umbrella of coverage. Now, when does that all get deployed? That element of it is happening right now. You're starting to see people deploy 5G networks on a spot basis. To have a ubiquitous system, the number I saw was it's going to take $200 billion of new equipment because you have to infill all these cell sites across the country. That's going to take 2 to 5 years at a minimum. But in the meantime, you're going to see the movement to 5G platforms and umbrellas inside buildings. Yes, sir.
So in rural areas, it seems impractical for 5G to really ever penetrate because of the short range and need for small wireless cells.
Yes and no. The reason is, in fact, one of the areas we're focused on at the university with our test bed is beam forming, and beam forming at the edge. And in fact, one project I'm on right now is to try to form an industry university cooperative research center with the rural co-ops. And their problems are, I'll give you three problems that they've come up with. One is what you've described. How do you deal with communication on the edge? I got a house out there 20 miles. I don't want to have to figure out how to do it. You can actually do what's called beam forming. I can form a beam that will go right to there using these 5G networks. The second thing is remote management of search and rescue. And what we're looking at are things like remote drones that become a hotspot in a given area and can overlook things. We also have advanced camera technology coming along that can look down and pick up infrared and hyperspectral images and see big bodies at night if you've got somebody you're looking for in the cold. Another area that is of real interest in these rural communities is wildfire management. The wildfire in California, that was the Camp Fire, cost what, $10 billion? In fact, I met with one of the people up in in Park City, who works in the city there, and they're very concerned about a possible wildfire in Deer Valley. Because you could destroy $100 million of property very quickly in a wildfire in Deer Valley. So how do you build systems that would sense that and allow for a rapid response? And can you sense the precursors? How many of those sensors would you need in a given area? There are unique ways to deal with issues in rural markets, and we're trying to figure out what those are.
So, you mentioned that UW's been awarded a $25 million grant to help penetrate 5G, but how much of that is contingent or dependent upon AT&T and Verizon? Or can 5G be practically implemented outside of those major carriers?
5G is a technology. It can be implemented on virtually any spectrum from 50 megahertz to 6 gigahertz. So who owns that spectrum is the question. Theoretically, it can be implemented on Wi-Fi at 2.4 gigahertz or 5.5. Now, you're going to run out of spectrum. You're going to run out of issues. So one of the things I am currently focused on is how could we get control of a hunk of spectrum here in Utah for our agencies and universities and for our test bed. There may be a way to do that.
So you're saying that, I guess, I don't know how much it is like in 4G, but 5G, you're saying leaves the door open and maybe to take advantage of more private wireless networks?
I think that you're going to see a natural move to that, okay? Just because of the way the network is, the way people are approaching this, what's called private LTE. If I've got a factory and I don't want to have interference from other folks in my Wi-Fi platform, I got to move off because it's going to happen. It's happening in hospitals now. You know, you get every new vendor wants his equipment to be Wi-Fi enabled, so he can talk to the network. But you get too many of them. You know, it will command and control it. And so you want to have a controlled platform, and that's where I think we eventually go, and that's where the demand is going to be. Yes, sir.
Do you foresee any cities or municipalities setting up their own 5G networks for their citizens, just within their city boundaries?
Why not?
Citywide?
If they want to. I mean, we have something called Utopia. You know, that and they've set up their own fiber to the premises in certain environments. You know, we could, if we had control of the spectrum, take that platform and expand that network using wireless. Period. Yes, sir.
A little out in left field question, but you know, as you're talking about all these things, all I can think about is the political appetite and the political concerns over privacy. So as these things, you know, continue moving forward, what do you see as some of the hurdles or ways to overcome some of those political hurdles, privacy concerns, and those sorts of things? Because those are already, I mean, I know lots of people. It sounds funny, but you know, who have gotten off Facebook and Google because of privacy concerns, and you know, hear politicians talking about that quite a bit. And I was joking here, a lot of things you're talking about sounds a lot like a Total Recall mixed with iRobot or something, you know, which we're not too far off of. Like, we used to look at Star Trek and the tablets they use, and what do we have now? But anyways,
You're absolutely right. Yes. And
so
in fact,
what do you think are some of the things we have to do politically to kind of make that move forward, that status quo move forward, and not hold up?
That's a really good question. I can give you two answers to that. Okay, one is China. China right now is creating what they're calling our social credit system. So they're monitoring everything you do, or everything that your citizens do. And if you're a good person and you don't get tickets for speeding, and you vote every time, even if you don't want to, and you do good deeds, you're going to get social credits. And the social credits get you a lower interest rate at the bank. It gets you more credit for buying a car. You know, you get in front of the line for buying a car. And that is a command and control platform. And then you overlay that with the ability to monitor everything everybody does on the internet. And 630 million cameras that have facial recognition, so they know where you are. It's a command and control platform. Now, here, we've gone in some ways to the other extreme. I mean, I personally really disagree with what Mark Zuckerberg has done with Facebook and said, I'm going to allow all political advertising on this platform, even if it's false. Okay? Now, how do you respond to that? I'm actually thinking of writing an editorial on that. And the focus being on, you know, I don't mind a free platform of ideas, but what Facebook has set up is the ability to create targets of who's going to get certain kinds of information. And it's that combination is where the danger is. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a comment on that there. There's a couple of corporations in Utah that are trying to get ahead of this. If you thought a little bit, you could figure out who those corporations are that are talking. Mike Lee, Senator Romney, Ben McAdams, trying to form a coalition of Republicans and Democrats that want to put forward a progressive privacy law so that there won't be a ridiculous privacy law in the future. Right? So there's a ton of discussion. There's a bunch of states that are sponsoring their own legislation, namely California, to kind of go way on one side, right? But anyways, if you're interested in forming a coalition of thinkers that are thinking about that, I can put you in touch with the people that are working with Senator Romney and Senator Lee and Ben McAdams to sponsor legislation.
Yes, sir.
So you started off talking about the economic disruption caused by all these technologies. It strikes me, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that the other thing that's really disrupting the space is the different kind of business model. So you mentioned Uber several times and their large market cap and all of those things. They have a business model where they've never turned a profit, right?
That is true.
So we used to have companies that were focused on building a profit, and now we have companies who are incredibly successful, have huge amounts of cash, but never make a profit. And that makes the whole economic landscape different. And when you look at the automated vehicle market, you've got the traditional automakers, General Motors, Ford, Toyota, Mitsubishi, etc., competing with those startup kinds of tech companies who have incredibly different business models because of that different kind of profit motive or non-profit motive scenario. Are you seeing some of that?
Yes, you know, actually, one of the most interesting things that's starting to develop is we're moving to what's called computation at the edge of the network. And the way to think about that is you've got an autonomous vehicle. It's going along at 70 miles an hour, and a deer jumps in front of it. You ain't going to the cloud yet. You know, you've got to process all that data on board. So one of the fundamental questions is, who owns that? Who owns that intelligence at the edge? Today, Chrysler uses Microsoft for its service provider in the screen that's in the car. You know, Chrysler's thinking, maybe we want to own that. Because as everything gets more integrated, whoever owns that computation piece is going to be own the value. And indeed, for the next round of spectrum auctions that's coming up, the new players look to be not only 4 carriers, but Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Crown Castle, Charter Communications, Comcast. So, you know, Uber has not made a profit to date, but to the extent that they can get to the point where they own that piece, that edge venue, if you will, do they start making a profit when you start running conferences inside the moving vehicle? When you start having entertainment inside the moving vehicle. I don't know. This is a, I don't know. Hi.
Could you describe where the test bed will be in Salt Lake City and what type of people and companies will be using it and how?
The test bed will be across the campus and across the residential area going to the downtown business district and to and including the downtown business district. It is really going to be more of a scientific test bed. It's a place to test advanced algorithms, advanced waveforms. And in fact, we were at a conference, I was at a conference 2 weeks ago, where DARPA, the big DoD research group, ran a contest for use of spectrum and how you could reuse it over and over. And they had 30 applicants, they narrowed it to 10, they had a big contest in the final 10. And of those 10, they gave $2 million prize to the winner, $1 million to the second runner-up, and the $500,000 to the third, and then offered to take this test bed for reuse of spectrum and pay for them being on our platform. So we're really a scientific platform, but out of that will come the applications, and that candidly is more interesting to me over time. Yes, sir.
So are smart cities looking to be smart highways also? So in theory, if trucks can drive themselves and every car can drive themselves, we get the minority report where there's no longer any accidents because the teenager that's texting is shut out of their phone or their car's driving themselves. Is the insurance industry a big player in this space or not?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yes.
Okay. They would know.
So what are the main challenges that you see slow down the adoption of technologies in smart cities and 5G in particular?
One of the main problems I see for smart cities is what I've described as vendor overload. I went to a smart city conference last April, and my God, you're some guy at a random city in the country, and you know there's 250 vendors. All of them tell you, I've got the answer, I've got the solution, you know, and they don't have the depth of experience to know that, to know what the right solution is. And it also is going to vary by city and by what its needs are, you know. A lead monitoring system for Flint, Michigan is probably a good thing, but I don't know if we need it elsewhere. Anything else? Yes, sir.
So the Powder Project, University of Utah, I've always, and this is based partly on conversations with Cobus Vanderbilt.
Oh, yeah.
I've always thought of it not necessarily as a 5G research platform, because 5G is sort of becoming commercialized, but as a next generation 6G, 7G, all kinds of out there on the edge kind of thing.
You're
You
absolutely
refer
right.
to it as a 5G platform. Have I misunderstood that?
That's my error. It is, you're absolutely correct. The platform we have is a software-defined architecture.
Yeah.
It is from 50 megahertz to 6 gigahertz, software-defined end-user devices, software-defined base stations, and the cloud. So, you know, if you think about 5G as integrated air interface technology, 6G, whatever that is, can come along, and this is a test bed that can apply there. And 4G as well.
And what's the FCC's, they named Salt Lake as a research city as well. I'm assuming it's building on this platform. Did they bring money to the table a couple of months ago?
Oh,
The FCC designated Salt Lake and one other place.
yeah, it's called an innovation zone.
Yeah.
For us and a square block in New York City. An innovation
Because of powder, right?
But because of, well, yeah, that was one of the factors, and also because of what we've got in terms of professors, including Cobus. Cobus, I admire greatly. But the way to think about it is this way. You got to test it. You got to have spectrum to test things on. And you want to have spectrum other than Wi-Fi, which is public spectrum. So historically, you would have to go to somebody who owns it and say, you're not using the spectrum over here. We'd like to use it. Can we use it? What happened with the innovation zone, the best way to think about it is the presumption for us and the one in New York City got changed. We know that's unused spectrum over there. We'd like to use it for a test 2 weeks from now at this time period. And we're going to do that unless you object. So we don't have to ask permission. That's the difference. Now, that still means we got to go use other people's spectrum. And what I'd like to do is figure out a way to get our own. That's what Cobus asked me. Can we get our own? I think we're done, unless somebody else has got a burning question. Yes,
I
sir.
have a question. What's your opinion about LoRa technology versus Wi-Fi?
Sure. LoRa is low power, long range. It's at 900 megahertz, which is public spectrum, by the way, 900 megahertz. And it can reach out 10 kilometers. But it's small amounts of bursty data. Okay?
Well, the thing is that it's more affordable for many countries. We don't talk about prices here because most people can afford the internet.
The problem with LoRa is the volume of data. You can use it for sensing devices. You can use it for command and control. There's a whole group of LoRa supporters, but you could not do augmented reality using that data. It couldn't support it. That's what the difference is. And I could see the integration of LoRa that's used to tell other networks to do things, but it's really just the command function. So think of it as small amounts of bursty data. Thank you. Hope that was useful.